when a German U-boat commander dives to avoid an incoming enemy aircraft. He leaves a fellow submarine undefended on the surface.
The moment a submarine is spotted, it's as good as dead.
The decision will tear apart the crew, as a devout Nazi accuses him of cowardice and disloyalty to Hitler. In World War II, a subsea weapon allows warriors to fight from beneath the waves. With cunning, force, and tenacity, their enemies strike back. Revolutionary, but still sometimes primitive. It's a desperate bid to change the courts of war. Their stories are legend. May 21st, 1942, the Caribbean Sea. German U-boat U-103 is on its 7th war patrol near Cuba. The hunting is plentiful. And they're a well-oiled crew, commanded by Captain Lieutenant Werner Winter. After a 2-torpedo attack, sinks a freighter. A second ship, the Elizabeth, tries to escape the same fate. It steams off to the south-southwest. As they start their pursuit, Winter summons Oberleutnant Zerzy Oskar Kusch to action.
U-103 is his first full-time assignment. He is the number 3 on board after the commanding officer and the executive officer. And he is also in charge of the deck artillery.
Winter's deck gun crew races into position, eager to intercept the target.
He may have had some lucky shots and sunk the freighter without using a precious torpedo.
Crew aboard the Elizabeth fight back and open up their guns to turn the tables on Werner Winter.
He's very disappointed because he's more vulnerable to artillery fire than the freighter itself.
Determined to sink the Elizabeth, but unwilling to risk any damage to the hull of U-103. Winter orders his first watch officer to launch another torpedo attack. Just 23 days, they will sink 9 ships, totaling over 42,000 tons, before returning to port.
During the first half of 1942, the Germans were using long-range boats for a surprise attack on US coast, and the operation was called Paukenschlag, which means drumbeat.
They exploit the confusion after Pearl Harbor.
The US were not prepared for U-boat attacks. There was no convoy, there was no air coverage, which was already present in Europe at the time.
Within 6 months, more than 400 vessels sink in American waters. German submariners call this period the Second Happy Time. Their success breeds camaraderie and respect, even as Winter and his men occupy tight quarters for long patrols.
In a submarine, you don't have that much space to get away. And so that may create something special.
One could almost call it a cocoon, where different rules applied compared, say, to surface vessels. It was quite accepted to voice your political opinions.
Winter's young second watch officer, Oskar Kusch, thrives on the lively debate. As a teenager, Kusch had refused to join the Hitler Youth. He would apply to the Kriegsmarine in 1936, torn between wanting to serve his country and hating its Nazi ideology.
The ethos of the U-boat arm fostered this kind of thing, the U-boat spirit, as they called it, and one of their tenets was that you would not rat on others.
Within a year of the attack on the Elizabeth, Oberleutnant Oskar Kusch earns his own U-boat with excellent endorsements from his former commander.
They were absolutely stellar. So many things that Winter would have had to do, Kusch almost instinctively solved for him.
The new commander of U-154 is just 24 years old.
He introduces himself very, very well by stressing not how many decorations he had earned, but about his experience. He had the heart of a seasoned mariner in him, and I can imagine that his crew liked to hear that.
But by March of 1943, the war has changed for Gross Admiral Karl Dunitz's U-boat crews. After the so-called happy times, the Allies answer back.
They established convoy system, they established air controls, air patrols, and so on. And times were getting harder for the German submarines to operate off the US coast.
German submarine losses each month double. As U-boats are lost, so are well-trained crew members. Veterans move to newly commissioned submarines to fill out their ranks, and existing crews get replacements. Oberleutnant Zersey der Reserve Ulrich Abel has been assigned to U-154 as first watch officer and will be second in command. In civilian life, he was a county judge. He served previously on a minesweeper, and this will be his first war patrol aboard a U-boat. In another key role, Chief Engineer Kurt Druschel is only a recent graduate of U-boat engineering school. He has never served on a U-boat either.
When the submarine operates submerged, the engineer is the second most important character to the crew beside the submarine commander. He has to be confident so the people know we can rely on that buddy.
To build the crew's confidence, the former engineer stays on board U-154 to show Druschel the ropes for the start of the patrol, and would later transfer off the U-boat and return to port. In his role as the new commander, Kusch settles in aboard the submarine. Included in the decor is a portrait of Adolf Hitler in a place of honor. Without a second thought, he removes the image of the Führer and dispatches it to be hung elsewhere.
There's a symbolic dimension to this, but it's typically Kusch. He sees something that runs against the way he feels. He will take care of it. He didn't want to wake up in the morning and his first look was at Hitler. He could do without.
Kusch replaces the picture with one to his liking. If there's any doubt,
it's their first real split. It sets the tone. It shows them that Kusch politically will be on the very opposite side of where they find themselves.
When U-154 leaves for its fifth war patrol, they depart from the U-boat base at Lorient, France. Kusch and his new crew travel thousands of kilometers to the southwest Atlantic off the coast of Brazil. After the long transit, in the morning hours of May 8, 1943, lookouts spot a target, a fuel tanker without an escort.
Fuel is used by tanks, fuel is used by aircraft. If they destroyed tankers, they take away the ability of the Allies to transport this very important raw material.
The new commander orders their first strike. As the first watch officer aboard U-154, Oberleutnant Zersy der Reserve Ulrich Abel will coordinate the surface torpedo attack. Despite an unexpected zigzag by the target, Abel lets loose 2 torpedoes when the tanker is just 400 meters away. Even at that very close range, they don't score a hit.
This is, of course, a very dark moment for the crew. How can you miss a big 8,000-tonner with 2 torpedoes? But Abel manages to do that, and is probably a reflection of his training. Minesweepers don't shoot torpedoes.
As the tanker speeds up, Kusch must salvage the situation and assumes control of the attack. With some adjustments, he sets up another salvo. This time, one of the torpedoes strikes the fuel tanker.
The crew could hear an underwater metallic sound, almost like a car crash. And so they figure out, yes, we hit that vessel, but it did not explode.
Alerted by the strike, the tanker called Moto Carline sends out distress calls. And its sailors open fire with their guns. Not wanting to expose the U-boat to a lucky shot, Kusch turns the submarine away to observe from a distance. Later, as they watch, there's an explosion.
They could not know that the torpedo was actually stuck, and then something must have happened. Maybe a fire broke out, and then that thing just went off like a delayed detonator.
It seems the torpedo lodged in the ship's hull finally activated. Oskar Kusch continues to prowl nearby, waiting to fire a torpedo and finish the wounded tanker, when a danger above draws their attention away. A PBY Catalina bomber closes in, alerted to the presence of the submarine by the tanker. Kusch orders the U-boat down. The pilot spots U-154 and attacks. As the U-boat dives, aerial bombs hit the water.
It is this feeling of helplessness, of not knowing whether the next one will be the one. It must have been the toughest thing for U-boat commanders and their crews.
Kusch and his men escape the underwater bombs, but miss their opportunity to sink the fuel tanker, which limps back to port despite the damage. Nearly 3 weeks later, as U-154 approaches a convoy, a system relatively new to German submarines activates below deck. The U-boat carries a passive radar receiver called a MATOX.
The Metox is a very simple device, interestingly produced by a French company. It's an antenna, it's a wooden cross where we have an aerial or antenna around it, so it looks like a kite for children.
While the U-boat is on the surface, the Matox receiver is mounted on the deck. A cable runs down the open hatch into the submarine. When radar transmits from a surface ship or aircraft less than 30 kilometers away, the Matox receiver detects it and an alarm sounds.
It just gives you time to evade and get underwater.
Aboard U-154, the Matox indicates that at least one vessel in the convoy is actively searching with radar. Even though they might be detected by the enemy radar, Kush risks a surface approach.
It looked like he knew they were searching, but as long as I don't have an indication that they would track me, I could get faster to the enemy, to a position for a perfect attack.
U-154 closes in on the convoy's starboard side to get within the escort screen. Then Kush takes matters into his own hands to conduct the attack himself. With a spread of torpedoes to target 4 ships, Oberleutnant Circe Oscar Kush launches an ambitious attack. He has usurped the job normally performed by the first watch officer.
He remembers what had happened. Abel had shot and missed. I feel very strongly that Kush decided we don't want to have a second motorcar line situation here.
Using all 4 torpedoes available in his bow tubes, he scores hits.
The distance to the convoy was perfect.
But Kush isn't finished. He spins the U-boat around and fires their 2 stern torpedoes at an 8,530-ton fuel tanker. Kush's decision to prosecute the attack himself delivers results. He has hit 3 targets, including the fuel tanker Florida. The escorts fire star shells and illuminate the carnage. But despite the remaining targets, all of their torpedo tubes are empty. Kush must withdraw the U-boat away from the escorts to give the torpedo crews time to reload. When they are ready, Kush considers another approach. But the activity topside makes it dangerous to creep in on the surface, and it's too dark for a submerged periscope attack. Kush decides to stand down until morning, leaving targets damaged, but not sunk. Hours later, Kush prepares to try again. He lines up another shot through his periscope. But one of the escorts turns in their direction from about 3,000 meters away.
A typical destroyer at that time would run with high speed of 32-35 knots. This means he will run 3 to 4 minutes until he's at the spot.
Kush does not have much time to get the U-boat down. He orders an emergency dive. As U-154 goes deep, the job of Chief Engineer Kurt Druschel is to relay commands to the dive crew. It's a tricky situation.
Kush had ordered a crash dive. It means that the boat will come down at a very or relatively steep angle.
With the plunge, the U-boat quickly passes its safe diving limit.
It takes an experienced engineer to pull out of that dive. Apparently, Druschel was overtaxed by this maneuver.
Cush maintains a calm presence, despite the danger.
No submarine commander would try to find out what the crush depth of his submarine really would be. Don't want to risk to get to that security margin.
Fortunately, they level off. But the rapid descent exacts a toll from the U-boat. Pumps, vents, and valves start to leak. U-154 can no longer pursue the Allied convoy. The failed attack increases the strain between Cush and the two officers.
I think we can all understand the tensions that would emerge between a highly intelligent commander with imagination, with experience, and so on, and someone who's 7 years older and who must have approached Cush often with envy, with feelings that betrayed his own shortcomings.
By mid-June 1943, they still suffer from leaks and other mechanical troubles. Their surface radar warning unit, the MATOX, has also stopped working. U-154 begins a return journey.
He's already out for about 3 months at the time. His crew is already getting exhausted. They still have to make their way back.
On June 28, 1943, Cush establishes contact with another U-boat. They rendezvous south of the Azores Islands. The commander of U-126 is Oberleutnant Serzi Siegfried Keats.
Keats and Cush knew each other from the Naval Academy. They began their officer training at the same time.
Keats is able to provide Cush with a replacement for their MATOX before reaching the Bay of Biscay.
That's probably the most dangerous part of their mission. Some call it the Valley of Death.
To get them safely back to port, Gross Admiral Karl Dönitz implements various strategies to protect his U-boats.
The largest threat are the aircraft of the Allies, and so he gives orders, run as fast as possible, and then he introduced a new system of combining the approach or departure by having 2, 3, or 4 submarines sailing together.
With its capacity to detect an aircraft using radar, the MATOX is an essential piece of equipment as they run the bay together. Just before 3 a.m. on July 3rd, the MATOX set supplied to Cush activates. Within seconds, U-154's conning tower is flooded with light. A powerful beam blinds the German crew on board U-boat 154 as it enters the infamous Bay of Biscay. A Wellington bomber flies low over the water.
By 1943, the Allies are mostly using Wellington bombers. They're twin-engined aircraft, they're able for long-range operations, especially once you fit in extra fuel tanks, and they're fairly easy to produce or remake if you're converting Bomber Command 1s to Coastal Command 1s.
A ley light is one of their new accessories.
A very, very powerful light. In fact, the first versions were literally searchlights, which had been fitted onto aircraft. The moment a submarine is spotted, it's as good as dead.
Oberleutnant Zerzy Oscar Kusch's gun crew mobilizes. However, the gun jams, and they can't get off a shot. But the aircraft bypasses U-154 and pursues U-126 instead.
For some reason, the British pilot apparently decided that Keats was the easier target. So he left Kusch alone for the time being and concentrated entirely on Keats.
The Wellington drops aerial bombs into the water near U-126. Before the aircraft could come around for another pass, Kusch orders an emergency dive.
The last things that could be seen from Kusch's boat was that the crew of Keats's boat had trouble with their Matox antenna and cables.
In case of an emergency dive, they have to take the Matox antenna, take it with them downstairs to close the hatch to start the diving process.
With their own bridge clear, U-154 slips beneath the waves. Kusch's executive officer, Oberleutnant Zerzy Ulrich Abel, wants to know what happened topside. Kusch tries for an update from U-126. He uses a communication method called an underwater telegraph.
The underwater telegraph, that's a hydrophone producing a sound where submarine commanders can communicate with each other in the water, not using radio transmissions.
But there's no reply.
The device is very dependent on environmental conditions, on salinity, on temperature, and on dense gradients in the water. If the message doesn't get through, you never know.
In time, the crew of U-154 hear a series of distant bangs.
In this particular case, the sounds could be interpreted either as perhaps distant artillery fire, or worse, an implosion at the end of Keats and his men.
Abel becomes frantic.
My theory is that the fouled up cables of the Matox antenna make it impossible to close watertight the tower hatch. There is a fatal inrush of water.
Abel demands they surface to search for U-126 and its crew. Like Kusch, he also has a friend on board the other U-boat.
Abel had the notion that there was still something that could be done under the circumstances, that he needed to return to the surface, have a look around.
Kusch remains submerged. He prioritizes the survival of his men. Keats is never heard from again. Three months later, U-154 sets out again to the South Atlantic. Oscar Kusch returns in command. Oberleutnant Zerzy Ulrich Abel remains on board as first watch officer. It's an unwelcome surprise.
This must have hurt Abel. Typically, you only did one such cruise under an experienced skipper, and then you got your own boat. Basically, he did not convince Kusch to write him a recommendation.
It's nearly summer off the coast of Brazil when the U-boat arrives. For this patrol, an Army staff surgeon joins them on board. Hans Nothdurft studies the effects of heat on the U-boat and crew. At these latitudes, temperatures inside a submarine can reach up to 36 degrees Celsius.
There's only so much your body can take. You cannot breathe right. You yearn for fresh air.
These long patrols to South America are so different to the patrols in the North Atlantic. German submarines do not have any refrigerators, as the Americans had. No ice-cold Coke or ice cream on a submarine.
On the morning of November 3rd, 1943, the sound operator picks up propeller noises from ships in the vicinity. At periscope depth, Cush sights a large convoy.
He had come upon that convoy at the most inopportune time. Early in the morning, there was no way he could catch up on the surface without being attacked.
U-boats usually stay submerged to avoid detection during daylight hours. Cush decides to stalk the convoy until nightfall. But underwater, U-154 can only travel at 3 or 4 knots. The convoy sails at 8 knots or more. The U-boat falls further and further behind. Cush worries that he won't have enough time to make up the distance after the sun sets.
He was very clear in his mind, I need to get into a better position.
So in mid-afternoon, Cush comes to the surface and risks a daylight approach to catch up. November 3rd, 1943. Now operating on its diesel engines, U-154 runs at a speed of 14 knots, or about 26 kilometers per hour. At this rate, Oberleutnant Oscar Cush expects to reach the convoy by about 2 a.m. Even before nightfall, though, they are detected. An enemy aircraft drops into view. U-154's MATOX unit fails to warn the crew.
The flying boat has kind of lowered itself carefully to remain out of sight. One big trick is always to come out of the sun.
With a moment to choose, Cush orders a dive. But without hesitation, the first watch officer, Oberleutnant Serzi Ulrich Abel, challenges the orders.
Abel overrules Cush in this situation and said, you all stay at your weaponry. And when it's about 2,500 meters away, open up.
U-154 begins to fire. At a range of 1,000 meters and under attack, the Catalina aircraft alters its course to drop its payload. Oscar Cush quickly counters and orders a hard turn. The submarine veers sharply. The aircraft still delivers its attack. 500-kilogram bombs explode as little as 20 meters away from the U-boat.
There's a lot of concussive force. Shrapnel from the bombs may pierce through the pressure hull of the submarine.
Cush orders another dive. And this time, everyone complies. Once they are deep, they assess the impact. There are several leaks and some equipment is damaged, but they have survived. It's a moment of working together. Abel distracted the aircraft with gunfire, and Cush orders the sharp swing to evade the bombs.
That's what saves them. This almost unspoken cooperation under pressure. The old minesweeper commander and the old U-boat commander getting it right.
Back at periscope depth, Cush observes that the Catalina still circles. There is no way to return safely to the surface. And submerged, they still lack the speed to catch the Allied convoy as they had the day before.
Auf 25 Meter gehen.
Cush decides to abandon the chase.
Wir sollten angreifen, dürfen nicht zögern.
But Abel and Chief Engineer Kurt Druschel pressure Cush to surface despite the presence of the plane,
Wir wollen da hoch.
believing they can still catch the convoy.
Wir können sie schnappen. Nein.
They, I don't think, ever could feel the responsibility that rested on Cush. Not just for the boat, but for all the men, including the two of them who always criticized him. I think they were incapable of thinking beyond the low-hanging fruit that they thought were within their reach.
In December, they begin their return journey. Cush and his crew have failed to sink a single ship on the patrol. Before they arrive in France, Abel and Druschel approach Staff Surgeon Hans Nothdurft with a brazen request. They press the Army officer to turn Oscar Cush into the authorities.
He was the highest ranking officer on board. He was not a Navy guy, and so it could appear as though he had no horse in the race.
Nothdurft refuses. In addition, he asks them not to report Cush when they arrive in Lorient without him, hoping time and distance would cool the emotions on board.
So this was a promise they gave him out in the Atlantic, and that is the situation when they finally reached Lorient again, just before Christmas in 1943.
Abel agrees. It's a vow he will not keep. January 20th, 1944, Lorient, France. Oberleutnant Zerzi Oscar Cush, commander of U-154, is recalled early. He's arrested at the train station. The charges stem from a 3-page report made by his first watch officer, which accuses Cush of cowardice, anti-Nazi sentiments, softness towards Jews, and listening to foreign radio broadcasts. Within 6 days, a military tribunal finds Cush guilty of continuously subverting the military strength.
The accusations were of a political nature. They were not of a military nature. So the shock was that this could be enough in the famous U-boat branch to condemn a man, a good man, to death.
Cush refuses to confess to any crimes or beg for mercy. Former commanders, like Captain Lieutenant Werner Winter, want Karl Dönitz to intervene on Cush's behalf.
They realized right away that the one individual who can change it all is Grand Admiral Dönitz, the great guru of the U-boat force.
But Dönitz does not act. He refuses to even speak with Cush. On May 12, 1944, Oscar Cush faces a firing squad. He had already imagined this moment in his own sketches, inspired by another artist.
And he had come across the romantic painting by Francisco Goya, where the Spaniards rise up against the usurpers. They are all caught and get executed. And these victims look their tormentor, shall we say, directly in the eyes.
Cush, too, will refuse a blindfold.
Anlegen! Ziel! Feuer!
His accuser and former First Watch officer doesn't witness the execution. Less than 3 weeks prior, Oberleutnant Ulrich Abel leaves on his first patrol as commander of U-193.
His own people must have felt great apprehension about serving under someone with that kind of background.
A day later, Abel's U-boat goes missing in the Valley of Death, the Bay of Biscay. Kurt Druschel and the crew of U-154 sail 2 more patrols under a new commander. Less than 2 months after Cush's death, it's attacked and sunk by an American destroyer near the Azores, with the loss of all hands. During World War II, Germany executes more than 30,000 of its own soldiers and sailors, compared to fewer than 50 British troops condemned to the same fate. A terrible legacy of service to the Nazi regime.
Kusch, he was not following blindly the Nazi system. He had his own mind, and that definitely cost his life.
In 1996, Cush is exonerated.
A law was passed in Berlin to do away with all of the verdicts that had been announced under Nazi rule if they had a political background. So he stands for many others and the injustice that would last another 50+ years after the war.
His legacy lives on.